The 18th of April, 1988, in the Persian Gulf, a 24-hour clash is about to erupt, the largest surface battle since World War II, codename Praying Mantis. In one day, missiles, guns, and fast gray hulls will settle a decade of tension. This is the moment the modern missile age met old-school gunnery on a moonlit sea. How did the United States and Iran reach this point? And how did the U.S. Navy cripple Iran's conventional power so quickly? To find out, we rewind to the late 1982, a grinding Iran, Iraq war, mined sea lanes, and a chain of attacks that dragged superpower steel into the Gulf. In September 1980, Saddam Hussein's Iraq launched a sudden invasion of Iran. His motives were layered, part fear, part ambition. The Islamic Revolution of 1979 had toppled the Shah and replaced him with a radical new regime. Saddam, ruling a secular Ba'athist Iraq, feared that Iran's revolutionary zeal would ignite unrest among his own Shia majority. Already struggling with Kurdish uprisings in the north, he could not afford another wave of internal instability. There were territorial disputes too. In 1975, Iraq had signed the Algiers Agreement with Iran, conceding key waterway rights along the Shatt al-Arab. Saddam considered the deal humiliating. Now, with Iran purging thousands of trained officers after the revolution, and its once formidable U.S.-supplied military crumbling under sanctions, Saddam saw his chance. If Iraq struck fast, he believed Iran could be knocked out in weeks. The opening assault had promise. Iraqi tanks surged across the border, and aircraft pounded Iranian bases. But Iran did not collapse. Revolutionary fervor, combined with rugged terrain and sheer manpower, stalled Saddam's forces. Within 18 months, Iran had not only repelled the invaders, but pushed into Iraqi territory. What was supposed to be a swift victory devolved into a bloody stalemate. Desperation drove both sides to brutal tactics. Iraq unleashed chemical weapons. Iran countered with the besiege ad hoc formations of volunteers, sometimes teenage boys and elderly men, who charged Iraqi positions in human waves. Losses were staggering, with hundreds of thousands killed, yet neither side broke. By the mid-1982, the war spilled beyond the battlefield. Oil, the lifeblood of both economies, became the next target. Tankers were struck, sea lanes mined, and the Persian Gulf transformed into a new front in the conflict. A storm was gathering at sea, and soon, the United States would be pulled directly into the fight. As the Iran-Iraq war dragged on, both sides searched for leverage. By 1984, the battlefield stalemate had spilled onto the waters of the Persian Gulf. Iraq, with limited coastline, relied heavily on pipelines through Kuwait and Saudi Arabia to move its oil to market. Iran knew this and began targeting tankers carrying Iraqi crude. The tanker war was born. Iraqi jets struck ships with French-made Exocet missiles, while Iran retaliated with mines, small boats, and air attacks. By the mid-1982, the Gulf had become one of the most dangerous shipping zones on Earth. Neutral vessels, especially those linked to Kuwait, were being dragged into the line of fire. The breaking point came in 1986, when Iran captured the Al-Faw Peninsula. Suddenly, Iran had a launch pad to fire Silkworm anti-ship missiles at tankers leaving Kuwait. With each hit, oil markets shuddered. Kuwait, desperate, looked for help. First, it turned to the Soviet Union, offering to reflag its tankers under Moscow's protection. The Soviets accepted eagerly, seeing a chance to expand their influence in the Middle East. But Washington could not allow the Soviets to gain that foothold. The Reagan administration countered with its own bold plan. The U.S. would reflag Kuwaiti tankers under the Stars and Stripes, guaranteeing them safe passage under the protection of the U.S. Navy. It was a direct challenge to Iran and a gamble. Thus began Operation Earnest Will. U.S. warships would escort tankers through the Strait of Hormuz and across the Gulf. On paper, the mission was simple. Every reflagged vessel that reached port safely meant success. In practice, the Navy was entering a minefield literally and figuratively. The tension became tragically real in May 1987. when the guided missile frigate USS Stark was struck by 2 Iraqi Exocet missiles. 37 sailors were killed, 21 wounded. Though Iraq claimed it was a mistake, the incident hardened Washington's resolve. If neutral shipping could be destroyed and American lives lost, then the U.S. Navy would not just escort tankers, it would fight to control the Gulf. The first major test of Operation Earnest Will came in July 1987. A convoy of 3 U.S. warships escorted 2 tankers, including the massive Bridgeton, through the Strait of Hormuz. At first, the passage seemed uneventful, but just north of the choke point, disaster struck. The Bridgeton shuddered violently. She had hit a mine. The explosion tore a 15-foot gash in her hull. Though she was empty of crude oil, the message was clear: Iran was sowing the Gulf with mines. Embarrassingly, the warships meant to protect the convoy fell in line behind the damaged tanker, using her bulk as a shield against more mines. The incident revealed a glaring weakness. America's mine warfare capabilities were thin, and Iran knew it. The U.S. responded decisively. Old minesweepers were pulled from retirement. CH-53 Sea Street Allied helicopters were outfitted with mine-detecting gear. Navy ships embarked more helicopters, while Army Special Forces and Navy SEALs joined the effort to hunt mine layers. Floating helicopter bases were even created at sea, after regional states refused basing rights. Washington was determined to catch Iran in the act. That chance came in September 1987. A U.S. patrol spotted what appeared to be a fishing trawler shutting off its lights. In the darkness, men prepared to push mines overboard. American helicopters swooped in, raking the deck with minigun fire and rockets. Survivors leapt into the water, but the ship, the Iran Ajr, was boarded by SEALs at dawn. On deck lay 9 Iranian naval mines, serial numbers intact. The evidence was irrefutable. Iran was mining international waters. Even then, Washington showed restraint. The Reagan administration authorized only a limited strike the following month. Operation Nimble Archer, U.S. warships surrounded an Iranian offshore platform used as a surveillance and missile base. After giving the crew time to evacuate, American shells and demolition charges reduced the structure to twisted wreckage. It was a warning, not a war. But Iran did not back down. In October, the U.S.-flagged tanker Sea Isle City was struck by a Silkworm missile while leaving Kuwait. 18 crew were wounded, the captain permanently blinded. The Gulf was becoming a battlefield without rules, and the stage was being set for a clash unlike anything seen since World War II, the 14th of April, 1988. The frigate USS Samuel B. Roberts was steaming south through the Persian Gulf when a lookout spotted something floating ahead. At first, the crew thought it was just debris, maybe even a dead animal tossed overboard by a merchant ship. But as the ship closed in, the truth became horrifyingly clear. They were in a minefield. The captain ordered the frigate to reverse course, inching carefully away. Then, disaster. A mine detonated beneath the hull, tearing a 25-foot hole and blasting the ship apart at its keel. Engines were ripped from their mounts, and the Roberts nearly snapped in two. 10 sailors were injured, but miraculously, none were killed. What followed became a textbook case of U.S. Navy damage control. The crew fought fire, flooding, and structural collapse for hours, literally holding the ship together with steel cables. Against all odds, the Roberts survived and limped to Bahrain under her own power, scarred but unbroken. But the investigation sealed Iran's fate. The mines recovered around the blast site bore the same serial numbers as those seized from the Iran Ajr. This was no accident, no mystery. It was Iran. And Washington's patience had finally run out. The response would not be limited patrols or symbolic strikes. It would be a direct, devastating blow, an operation designed to cripple Iran's naval power once and for all. The order was given: prepare for Operation Praying Mantis. The 18th of April, 1988. The U.S. Navy launched Operation Praying Mantis, the largest surface battle since World War II. The mission: punish Iran for mining the Gulf and crippling the Samuel B. Roberts. The American task force was divided into 3 surface action groups, or SAGs. SAG Bravo would attack the Sasson oil platform. SAG Charlie targeted the Siri platform. SAG Delta would stand ready to intercept Iranian warships. At dawn, the operation began. U.S. ships issued warnings in both English and Farsi: evacuate or be destroyed. On the Sasan platform, Iranian gunners manned their weapons, calling Tehran for orders. The Americans gave them 30 minutes, no more. At exactly 8:04 a.m., shells rained down. The first round hit an anti-aircraft gun crew, wiping them out instantly. Survivors scrambled down ladders to a tugboat. Marines fast roped in, gathered intelligence, and wired explosives. Moments later, the entire structure vanished in a thunderous blast. Meanwhile, SAG Charlie encircled the Siri platform. Here, the Iranians resisted. Despite repeated warnings, some gunners stayed at their posts. U.S. warships opened fire with 5-inch shells and 76mm cannons. An American round struck a gas tank, igniting a fireball that incinerated defenders. The rest fled as flames consumed the installation. But Iran would not stay silent. From port emerged the Joshan, a missile patrol craft bristling with American-made harpoons. Defiant, she charged directly at USS Wainwright and her escorts. Radio warnings blared: turn away or be destroyed. Joshan's captain ignored them and fired a harpoon missile. The missile streaked toward the Wainwright. The frigate launched chaff, decoys of burning metal. The missile veered at the last second, splashing harmlessly into the sea. The U.S. force responded with overwhelming firepower 4SM-1 surface to air missiles repurposed for surface attack. Joshan's superstructure exploded. Her hull burned from bow to stern. A final barrage of 5-inch shells sent her beneath the waves. The battle was far from over. Iranian F-4 Phantom jets scrambled, racing toward the U.S. task force. The Wainwright locked on and fired 2 missiles. One Phantom was hit, limping home with a shredded wing. For the first time in decades, American sailors had fought both ship and aircraft in the same day and prevailed. Yet tragedy struck on the American side too. A Marine Cobra helicopter, deployed earlier in the operation, failed to return. Months later, its wreckage was found on the sea floor. The likely cause: disorientation during evasive maneuvers. The 2 pilots became the only American casualties of the battle. By nightfall, after nearly 12 hours of combat, the Gulf was littered with burning platforms, shattered vessels, and smoldering oil slicks. But the operation was not yet finished. Elsewhere, U.S. aircraft and ships were hunting for bigger prey: Iran's frigates. The day's most dramatic clashes were still to come. As smoke rose from the wreck of the Joshan, U.S. commanders turned their eyes to Iran's larger warships. Tehran, humiliated by the loss of its patrol craft and platforms, ordered its frigates to sea. The first to appear was the Sahand, a Somme-class frigate armed with surface-to-air missiles, guns, and torpedoes. American aircraft from the carrier Enterprise spotted her near Bandar Abbas. When an A-6 intruder flew close to identify the vessel, the Sahand opened fire, unleashing missiles and anti-aircraft bursts. That act sealed her fate. The A-6 retaliated, launching a harpoon missile, rockets, and a 500-pound bomb. The damage was severe, but more was coming. Soon, SAG Delta closed in with 3 U.S. warships, supported by additional strike aircraft. Together, they unleashed a storm of ordnance. Harpoon missiles slammed into the Sahand, followed by more bombs from intruders circling overhead. In total, she absorbed at least 12 direct missile hits and multiple bomb strikes. Flames engulfed the ship. Explosions ripped through her magazines. Within minutes, the once proud frigate capsized and sank, vanishing beneath the Gulf in a boiling cauldron of fire and black smoke. But Iran was not finished. Her sister ship, the Sabalan, sailed forth under the notorious Captain Nasty, infamous for harassing merchant ships and mocking their crews. As U.S. aircraft tracked her, the Sabalan fired anti-aircraft guns skyward, daring the Americans to attack. Lieutenant Commander James Engler, piloting an A-6, accepted the challenge. Diving low, he released a single 500-pound bomb with surgical precision. The bomb plunged straight down the Sabalan's funnel, detonating deep inside her engine room. The explosion was catastrophic. Witnesses reported the frigate's hull bulging outward, then collapsing inward again. Her stern sagged into the sea. Fires raged across the decks, and she lay crippled, unable to move or fight. At that moment, the U.S. task force had the chance to finish her off completely. One more missile strike could have sent Sabilin to the bottom, alongside her sister ship. But Washington hesitated. Admiral Crowe and the Joint Chiefs, consulting President Reagan, recommended restraint. Enough blood had been spilled. The message was already clear. Iran's navy could not stand against the United States. Reagan agreed. The order went out, hold fire. Let the Iranians salvage their wreck. And so, tugboats hauled the battered Sabilin back to port. She would eventually return to service, but forever scarred as the symbol of Iran's near destruction. By day's end, Iran had lost a frigate, a patrol craft, 2 offshore platforms, and multiple small boats. Another frigate lay dead in the water, spared only by American mercy. The largest surface battle since World War II had ended in total U.S. dominance. When the guns finally fell silent, the balance of power in the Gulf was undeniable. In a single day, the U.S. Navy had crippled Iran's surface fleet, proving it could annihilate Iran's conventional forces at will. For Tehran, the humiliation was immense. Platforms destroyed, ships sunk, and hundreds of sailors lost, all with minimal American casualties. Yet restraint defined the finale. By sparing the Sabilin, Washington sent a calculated message. The U.S. was not seeking total war, only to enforce order at sea. For Iran, the lesson was bitter but lasting. Confronting the United States head-on meant certain defeat. Operation Praying Mantis became a case study in modern naval warfare. The power of combined arms, the value of precision strikes, and the importance of escalation control. It was proof that in the missile age, a 24-hour battle could reshape decades of strategy.